Okay, I'll now welcome Qantas and Virgin to come forward. Just keep going. Okay, well look, I now welcome representatives from Qantas and Virgin Australia. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, could you please state your names in which you appear, in the capacity, in which you appear today? We might start with you then, Mr. Adams.
Murray Adams, Head of Fuel and Operations Efficiency for the Qantas Group.
Captain Alex Passerini, Chief Technical Pilot at Qantas Flight Operations. Thank you.
Peter Strood, Head of Sustainable Operations for the Qantas Group.
Scott Mitchell, Partner Performance Manager at Virgin Australia.
Stephen Beckett, General Manager of Government and Industry Affairs at Virgin Australia.
Thank you to you all, and thanks. We have just received a submission from Qantas. Thank you for that, and you do have an opportunity to make an opening statement if you wish. Would you like to do so? And don't mind who goes first, but Captain, you look ready to go. So over
ready to go. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. We welcome the opportunity to appear before the committee. My name is Alex Passerini. I'm Qantas's Chief Technical Pilot. I operate the Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner from Australia to ports including London, Rome, New York, Johannesburg, Tokyo and Santiago. I have been operating commercial aircraft for more than 30 years. I am joined by my colleagues Murray Adams, Head of Fuel and Operations Efficiency, and Peter Strood, Qantas's Head of Sustainable Operations. Aviation plays a critical role in connecting Australian communities, especially those in rural, regional and remote Australia, and makes an important economic contribution. The Qantas Group alone helps to generate more than 1% of gross domestic product in Australia and more than 170,000 Australian jobs through total economic contribution and economic contribution of Qantas Group facilitated tourism. In the state of Queensland, where we meet today, tourists carried by the Qantas Group in 2022-23 contributed 21,630 jobs, and $2.5 billion in value to regional Queensland. Indeed, regional Queensland accounts for almost half of the total facilitated tourism value added in regional Australia by the Qantas Group. The Qantas Group acknowledges government and community concerns about aircraft noise and continues to pursue procedural efficiencies supported by the latest innovations in flight planning and air traffic management to mitigate its effect. The Qantas Group participates in community forums and working groups around the country where we listen to and contribute to the conversation on aviation-related issues, including noise. Airports are critical national infrastructure. Our aim at all airports is to optimise the flow of air traffic, reduce emissions and ensure that Australia's airspace remains safe, secure and efficient. As Australia is an international civil aviation organisation contracting state, the Qantas Group must consider noise around airports within the framework of ICAO's balanced approach to aircraft noise management. This consists of identifying noise at an airport and analysing the measures available to reduce it through reduction at the source, land use planning and management, noise abatement operational procedures and aircraft operating restrictions. It is important that the impact of some noise mitigation initiatives on efficiency and emissions are properly understood. Balance is critical. While well-meaning attempts to address noise concerns and mitigation often result in inefficient flight paths and operating procedures that lead to increased track miles, higher fuel burn and emissions, which work directly against the sustainability objectives of the industry that benefit the broader community. Qantas is a global leader in research and development of advanced navigation procedures that can help balance noise, environment and airport utilisation. The current jet transport fleet, including that of our competitors, have had significant capability for the past 20 years that, unfortunately, remains largely dormant and underutilised. This is a source of frustration for us and the industry. The Qantas Group encourages the committee to work with airlines and aviation sector stakeholders more broadly to fully understand the relationship between noise and emissions and to ensure that the economic and environmental impact of noise mitigation measures are considered appropriately when making their recommendations. In our view, the most effective way of reducing aircraft noise at the source is continual renewal of aircraft fleet types. Modern aircraft are markedly quieter than prior generations, and investment in new aircraft will continue to play a significant role in the management of aircraft noise. The Qantas Group has a major fleet renewal program in place which represents the largest and most significant fleet order in Australian aviation history, with deliveries already underway and continuing for at least the next decade. On average, the Group will take delivery of new aircraft every 3 weeks for the next few years. These state-of-the-art aircraft include the Airbus A320neo family, the Airbus A220-300, the Boeing 787-9, 787-10 and the Airbus A350-1000, which will deliver a range of benefits such as lower emissions, improved mechanical reliability and, importantly, up to a 50% reduction in noise footprint. Jetstar has now taken delivery of 10 Airbus A321neo LRs that have a significantly smaller noise footprint area and are fitted with a CFM LEAP 1A engine that burns up to 20% less fuel than Jetstar's earlier A321 aircraft. Qantas has also commenced the retirement of its Boeing 717 fleet, which is being replaced by new Airbus A220-300 aircraft over the next 3 to 4 years. We already have 2 of 29 in service. The A220 aircraft offer longer range capability, allowing for more point-to-point flying within our regional network across Australia, approximately 25% fewer CO2 emissions per seat, up to 50% noise footprint reduction compared with previous generation aircraft, and around 40% less nitrogen oxide emissions than industry standards. Thank you, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you, Captain. Virgin, would you like to make an opening statement? Mr. Beckett.
Thank you, Senators. As we know, aviation plays a critical role in connecting people, businesses and economies. Aviation is a key economic, social and cultural enabler, and for an island nation the size of Australia, aviation is an essential service. However, at Virgin Australia, we understand the need to strike the balance between the benefits of air travel and the wellbeing of our flight path communities. Virgin Australia acknowledges the genuine impacts of aircraft noise for some people who live in flight path communities, and we understand the importance of ensuring that our operations are efficient, sustainable and minimise disruption to local residents and businesses. So you're aware, both Scott and I live in flight path communities. Combsley Hotel, where we meet today, is my local, and I live just a few hundred metres from here under the direct final approach of the Legacy runway. Scott lives on the other side of the river.
Yep,
under the Legacy flight path. So we both know and have been woken up by aircraft late at night. We have had to rewind the Netflix and watch sections again because it's been noisy, and we've had to repeat conversations, sometimes unrelated to aircraft noise, but in relation to our families. In acknowledging this, Virgin Australia works with Air Services Australia and collaborates with a range of industry partners such as airports, government authorities, including the Department of Infrastructure and Transport, and organisations and groups representing the community and environmental protection. We have representatives that serve on a range of airport community aviation consultation groups across Australia, including here in Brisbane and Western Sydney. Virgin Australia participates in the Sydney Airport Community Forum, and we've been active in the development of the Noise Action Plan for Brisbane via our role on the new Brisbane Airport Community Airspace Advisory Board. VA provided specialist technical advice into Air Services Australia's safety case to the Civil Aviation Safety Authority to safely increase the tailwind allowance at Brisbane Airport, with the aim of enabling more flights to arrive and depart over the uninhabited waters of Moreton Bay. We're investing in newer, more fuel-efficient and quieter aircraft as part of our airline's transformation. We've taken delivery of 4 new generation 737-8 aircraft, with one of them arriving just a few weeks ago. According to the manufacturer, these aircraft are around 40% quieter when compared to our 737-800 fleet. Additionally, our new aircraft are not only quieter, but they also are much more fuel efficient, and we have 36 new generation aircraft on order. Our commitment to responsible aviation practices is reflected in our comprehensive submission to the Aviation Green Paper. In November last year, we outlined our initiatives and strategies regarding noise management and community consultation. This include investing in advanced technology and operational procedures, and we talked about the graduated flight descents, which is all designed at reducing noise during takeoff, landing and in flight. Furthermore, we emphasise the significance of engaging with communities affected by aircraft noise, fostering open communication channels and implementing measures to address their concerns effectively. Today, our evidence is grounded in the insights and commitments made in our submission, and we collaborate regularly with government bodies, industry and local communities. Our three main points in our submission, as I conclude, our recommendations are that the Noise Complaints Information Service, rather than sitting within Air Services Australia, should sit with CASA or the Department of Infrastructure and Transport. This would strengthen the independence, enhance its capacity to provide objective advice and information, and ensure that decisions regarding noise complaints benefits both the community and the travelling public. Secondly, like the NCIS, the Aircraft Noise Ombudsman, which sits with Air Services Australia, we believe it is unable to be truly independent when conducting investigations and making recommendations, and we think that it should sit with the Department of Infrastructure and Transport to ensure impartiality. And finally, greater public awareness of aviation is critical to improve communities' receptiveness to changes in flight paths and to mitigate the concerns about aircraft noise from the onset.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett. We just had a request. Would you be able to table that opening statement? Is that possible?
Yeah, happy to.
Okay, all right. Emma, when she comes back, will grab that from you. Thank you very much. And I'll go to Senator Waters first for questions.
Thank you, and thanks both for appearing today and for your respective statements. All right, I'll speak up. It's been a long day. I didn't get a cup of tea. Can I ask firstly of Qantas, and this is a bit roundabout, but apparently in October of 2023, the Brisbane Airport Corporation told Minister King that Jetstar was going to be fitting new vortex generators to its A320s. Now, I heard your reference to the A321s, and that sounded fine, but I understand that this, where is this at, the new vortex generators for the A320s? Was that ever genuinely a commitment made, and if not, why not, and what's happened with that?
Certainly. Senator, thank you for the question. So the vortex generator modification, the vortex generator being an airflow control device, in this case on the A320 that is located close to the fuel vent port, and there has been a modification introduced in production since 2015. At this moment, approximately 20% of the Jetstar fleet have the vortex generator installed. With our delivery of A321 Neo aircraft, of which we currently have 10 in the Jetstar fleet, that will be growing to 18 by the end of this calendar year. That will mean 35% of the Jetstar fleet will be equipped with the vortex generator. And it is likely that within the next 2 years, with our fleet renewal program, that the majority of those vortex generator-equipped aircraft will be retired. On the subject of the vortex generator, I will say that the manufacturer does not have any conclusive benefit for the installation of the vortex generator. At best, the estimates by some European carriers are up to 4 decibels reduction. Typically 2 is reported. According to the Australian Federal Noise Ombudsman, 4 decibels is barely perceptible. And frankly, the best, most advantageous aspect is the fleet renewal program, because those aircraft are up to 50% quieter than their previous generation aircraft.
Okay, thank you. Well, in relation to that then, at what stage will the fleet be completely renewed?
100%. So on current estimates, as I mentioned, at the end of the calendar year, we'll have 35% of the Jetstar fleet completed. And because of the introduction of these new aircraft, which are up to 50% quieter than previous generation aircraft, and the remainder of the fleet that do not have the vortex generator installed will most likely be retired within the next 2 years. It's important to note that those modifications would be done in what's called a C check, a heavy check, which is typically takes between the aeroplanes visit a C check every 18 months to 6 years, depending on where they are in the program. So the fleet renewal is a much more advantageous way of getting the vortex generators, but more importantly, getting the benefit of those new aircraft with those new generation engines that are up to 50% quieter than what they represent, which is far more significant than the up to 4 decibels, which is barely perceptible.
Understand. Thank you. And so that was my second question. When will the new aircraft be? When will your fleet be 100% new aircraft? The up to 50% quieter that you've referenced.
Yeah. So the majority of the fleet that do not have vortex generators installed are likely to be retired in approximately 2 years.
Yep. And so when will the fleet be 100% new aircraft?
I can take that question on notice to give you an absolute metric. I just would like to say that you're probably aware that we've had some delays in production from Airbus. The A350-1000 for our Sunrise project, they're approximately 6 months late because of some certification reasons. The A321neo fleet are about 3 months late. So obviously, if you can't get the new airplanes in, you can't retire the older airplanes. So that's part of the reason why I'm using that terminology.
I understand those delays aren't your doing, but do you have a rough estimate, given that the community's here and they're so desperate for solutions and a good night's sleep? Do you have an estimate for when, and I'll ask Virgin the same question, when your fleet will be 100% new aircraft?
Within approximately 2 years.
Okay.
As I mentioned...
I thought you were saying the 2 years included the retrofitting with the vortex generators.
No, we're not...
You do not turn over a whole fleet in 2 years.
I'm saying that by the end of this calendar year, we'll have 18 aircraft, with which are A321neos. They have the vortex generator installed in production, and the remainder of the fleet will most likely be replaced with new aircraft within approximately 2 years.
Okay, so 2 years, give or take a few months, given the manufacturing delays. Okay, thank you.
Can I just clarify?
So
Is that
only-
all aircraft, like
That's
the dash?
only the A320.
What about the dash that I use?
No,
all the time?
the,
no. Okay. We're just talking about jet.
The only aircraft that...
This is Jetstar. Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And again, I press the point that most of the industry reporting relates to approximately 2 decibels, up to 4 at the outside, and according to the Federal Noise Ombudsman, that is barely perceptible. So the most powerful driver of reducing aircraft noise is fleet renewal, and we're embarking on the largest in Australian history, and that important point, 1 new aircraft every 3 weeks for the next few years, just to your point, in terms of the rapid rate.
Are you speaking about Qantas and all of your subsidiaries?
Qantas, that's correct.
Yes, okay, thank you. Same question now to Virgin. How are you going in terms of modernity of your fleet, and what are your timeframes to have quieter aircraft?
Yeah, so as you heard, we've got an additional 36 on order. We hope to have at least 6 more this year, but for a complete overhaul, turning out of the fleet, you'd expect it to be up to 10 years for the whole fleet to be turned over. That said, because we do have the youngest fleet in the country, there are some aircraft that are relatively much younger, so they'll have many years before they're to be swapped out.
Will those ones which have a longer lifespan left in them be able to be retrofitted with devices that make them quieter, and have you plans to do that?
Absolutely, Senator. So on our 737-800 fleet, one thing that we're able to do similar to Jetstar with the Airbus components is we can install what are known as split scimitar winglets, which is when you've got a traditional sort of 737-800 wing, you have sort of these at the end. What we are doing on a majority of our fleet is actually splitting them out, which not only makes them more fuel efficient, but does in turn also make them quieter.
Okay.
Similar technology, but just not exactly the same.
Okay. Similar issue you're addressing. How many of those have you got fitted with the split scimitar winglets, and what's your time frame for all of your craft to have that feature?
Senator, I'll try and get the detail for you by the time our time is up. If not, happy to take that on notice and come back to you afterwards.
May I have one more, please, Chair? Thank you. Just in relation to the full runway usage trial that we've talked about quite a bit today, the point being that the height wasn't, and forgive my layperson's description here, but because the point at which you're aiming didn't change, the study didn't really show whether or not, the study didn't show any noise benefits, but it pertained to the safety of the gradient that's able to be flown. Do you have a view on the percentage of gradient that is safe to be flown for takeoff?
Senator, the question of gradient. So I participated in that trial when I was on the 737 and the full-length departure trial, not full thrust, full length.
Yes.
And I understand that the results of those trials was approximately 1 decibel reduction in noise, which is not perceptible. Hence the conclusion that was reached. I think your question relates to the gradient capability that the aeroplanes can fly. I just want to point out that typically the standard instrument departures, the SIDs that are the air traffic control cleared mechanism that's used to provide standard flight paths departing an airport, arriving they're called STARS, so they're 2 key acronyms that we use. Yep. So the SIDs that we use describe to the pilot and to the aeroplane's navigation system the flight path to be flown both laterally and vertically. Currently the gradients are between 5 and 7% at different points. If we increase those gradients, that requires additional engine thrust to increase the gradient capability of the aeroplane.
Even if you're using more of the runway?
Yes, it depends on conditions, environmental conditions, the weight of the aircraft and so on. And what that means is more thrust means more noise, particularly laterally. So it is somewhat counterintuitive. The most effective mechanisms are the fleet renewal programs that we've talked about, and particularly in the, I can touch on the noise abatement departure procedures that are used, and so on. But I am aware of the noise trials that were done in terms of full length, and that's what I'm across.
Yeah. The key thing is, did those SIDs change during the trial?
Chair, I'm not aware that they changed.
And you participated in it, so you used the whole runway, but you took off at the same gradient during the trial.
Yeah, so the SID describes a lateral and a vertical path.
Yep.
So
it's not surprising the result was only a 1 decibel change because the gradient didn't change.
Yeah, but those altitudes are at or above altitudes, so it's not prohibiting the aeroplane, it's not holding the aeroplane down, so to speak. So
anyway, it seems very strange. They did this real-world trial, all this effort, and that doesn't seem to have done what was intended. Your point about the more thrust, so to get to a higher altitude, that means more noise at the airport, I presume, is what you're saying, and you balance that against less noise on the flight path per se.
Yes.
Now, this may be different in different airports, but here at Brisbane, my understanding is that it is one of the airports with houses the furthest away compared to some others in the city. So the balance of that question here at Brisbane might be that you would trade off more noise at the airport, where there are very few houses close by, and have lower noise for people under the flight path. Is that a fair way of looking at that? The proposition you've put?
I think, Chair, in isolation, but I will say that using more thrust for takeoff is problematic on a few fronts. One is that
because it costs you more.
There's an economic aspect, yes, but I will say there's a safety aspect. So I've been in my role for 20 plus years. I've been flying aeroplanes for 30 plus years. The old adage, look after your engine and it will look after you, has not changed. So we always are driving to use the maximum amount of reduced thrust on takeoff that we can, conditions permitting. The reason behind that is the rotational forces within the engine are reduced, the temperatures and pressures are reduced. So there are two aspects to that. One is the probability of an engine failure is reduced, and if the aeroplane strikes a bird, of which there are some bird hazards in the Brisbane area as one example, and many airports around the country, the likelihood of the engine safely continuing operating is increased. So there is a safety aspect, and there is also a engine on wing maintenance aspect as well.
Are those aspects covered by these international standards we've been speaking about earlier?
The ICAO standards.
ICAO, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, the ICAO standards. I'm not aware that the ICAO framework, it discusses the use of reduced thrust for takeoff. I think the other aspect was the environmental aspects, the amount of tailwind and so on that are prescribed in the ICAO framework.
While we're on it, I'm taking other senators' time, but I am the chair. While we're on it, do you have, as a captain, do you have a view about the tailwind issue that's been discussed earlier today, and the proposed change here at Brisbane to 7 knots?
Chair, I've participated in sod props in Sydney primarily, and to a lesser extent here in Brisbane. I'll just call out that sod prop stands for simultaneous opposite direction parallel runway operations. To all those ports and more that I fly to, there is no other area in the world that uses them. Heathrow,
Sydney does too.
Sydney does too, but I'm sorry, we've touched on both Sydney and Brisbane, but there's nowhere outside Australia that uses them. Heathrow uses a runway alternation mode. We land between 4:30 and 6 a.m. in Heathrow, and they have some procedures there, but they are operating the runways in a specific direction, not in opposite directions. So with that comes some minimum cloud and visibility restrictions. I was one of the people in Qantas that reviewed the request to increase the tailwind component. We were supportive of an increase to 7 knots, and we presented our position to CASA after careful risk review. But CASA have applied the international standard, which is 5 knots. I have to say that operating in tailwind conditions adds some risk to a category that ICAO define as runway excursion. Runway excursion risk is the aeroplane departing the end of the runway or the side of the runway. Tailwinds are problematic for a few reasons. One is where they're measured on the runway. You've got a piece of bitumen that's 3.5 kilometres long. There need to be a number of measuring points along that. There can be variations along the runway. The delay in air traffic control receiving the speed of the wind and then transmitting that to the pilot. So there are some inherent limitations in that reporting system. So 5 knots has been established for a reason in the ICAO world. And frankly, pilots, and we teach them to apply a level of conservatism, will add a tailwind component to their takeoff performance calculations. And by regulation, we are required to factor in 150% of the tailwind component. What I'm getting at is there is more thrust used when we're operating in tailwind conditions. So again, it can be counter to what people might expect for some of the reasons that I've just described.
Thank you for that. It's useful for us. Sorry, Senator Mackenzie, you were next.
Thank you so much, Chair. Gentlemen, one and all, great to have you here. Qantas, you've submitted to government that, and I quote, there is currently a lack of clarity around the allocation of responsibilities on some issues between CASA and Air Services and the need for greater cross-department synergy. Can you explain to the committee what you actually mean by that?
Senator, I was not involved in writing that. I will say that...
Mr Strubb, were you involved in writing this?
No, Senator.
Mr Adams, were you involved in writing this?
Is this the submission you're referring to, Senator?
Yes.
Yep.
So maybe you can explain
Yes.
that.
So I think what that refers to there, Senator, is around what we've touched on, what the committee has touched on previously around the constraints of flight path design, how they're then implemented and what we can operate as an airline.
So I want you to explain, as the major airline operator in this country, exactly what you mean about that, because we've heard it from a lot of different stakeholders, and now it's your turn.
I'll start.
Unpack the problem with Air Services Australia.
I'll start and then I'll hand across to Captain Passerini, Senator. We have a level of frustration that there is technology in our aircraft that we have today, as well as the aircraft that we are renewing, that would allow us to fly procedures that could reduce the noise.
Such as?
Required navigation performance, so R&P is an opportunity. For those flights, we see an increase in the time when the aircraft is sitting at idle, so a reduced thrust, therefore reduced noise. We also see a significant increase in the amount of time that the aircraft is avoiding adding and taking away thrust. So we've talked about the step down as part of the committee. So continuous descent approaches remove that. And also the added benefit to that is we also see a reduction in the CO2 emissions because of those flight paths. We aren't able to use those at the moment, Senator.
Why? Why, Mr Adams?
I might hand to Captain Passerini.
I will say that I was involved with the early trials of RMPAR. So the aeroplanes, our competitors' aeroplanes have had the capability for 20 years. Frankly, in terms of how the airspace is designed and how it's managed, has been an impediment to wider scale use of those procedures, because we feel that they're an effective noise mitigation tool in the current fleet. It's nothing we have to wait for. Our pilots are trained on most fleets to use them, as are our competitors, and they are actually deployed in Brisbane today. It's the utilisation that is the problem.
So for those of us following at home who don't fly planes, who aren't as into the language of aviation, why can't these mitigation strategies, which exist in the current fleet right now, and our pilots have the current skilled capability to deploy them, is what I'm hearing, what is stopping that happening? Not just at Brisbane Airport, but at airports across the country.
Senator, the RMPAR procedures, it stands for authorisation required. They need a special CASA approval, but they have tremendous flexibility in terms of how we can design them to avoid noise-sensitive areas. We in the aeroplane business need predictability to the runway end. If we have predictability, which these procedures provide, we can fly noise abatement approach procedures. That means we can.
Okay, sorry. So I'm in the policy. Yeah, I'm in the policy end, and we're on limited time. So I just want to get to what do I need to fix to solve the problem.
Senator, I think there'll be an excellent conversation with Air Services Australia, because they are the airspace designers.
And we got there in the end, Captain.
And the air traffic control community as well, and the integration with the systems that they might need to facilitate.
What's CASA? You were starting to talk about CASA there, which I thought we were going down a different rabbit hole. So
no,
it's actually the application of those regulations by Air Services Australia.
Yes.
Has Qantas made this clear to Air Services Australia?
Yes, we have. And there
has Qantas made it clear to the Minister's office?
Senator, I have not met, and neither of my colleagues have.
I'm absolutely sure that's why the three of you are here. Because I would have liked to have seen your CEO here and someone a little higher up the chain that does have those conversations with the Minister's office, with her department. That's who I want to know. So on notice, I would like you to go back to Ms Hudson and your GovRel's team in general. Who have you met with in the government? Have you had a meeting with Minister King? Have you had a meeting with the Prime Minister or their officers and raised this issue? The specific plus the general issues with Air Services Australia. Because we've heard from Brisbane Airport today that the Minister hasn't gone to them and said, what the hell's going on with the noise at Brisbane? They've had to raise with her that this is a problem because she won't meet with the community. So I really do, you've articulated perfectly the problem, how to solve it, or one of the 1%ers. And I want to know what the government knows, if the government's aware of this. Thank you, gentlemen. Virgin. You've heard the very articulate evidence of the captain. Are you aware of this issue? What would Virgin say is a significant barrier to getting this under control? And what lobbying, what conversations, what pressure have you put on, or further up the chain from you guys have put on Prime Minister's office, Minister's office, department? Thank you.
Senator, I can talk to some of the technical conversations that I'm fortunate to have in my day-to-day role, where I am required to manage air services from a customer perspective.
Wow.
Thank you. Senator, at every opportunity we get, it is part of my day-to-day job to bring about efficiencies where possible to our airline business. Now, as Captain Passerini did say, RMPARs are a great way to bring efficiencies to flight paths because of the enhanced accuracy that they bring, given the new technology. I have been working with Air Services for a number of years to bring in greater RMPARs at a number of ports, but flight path design does take a number of years to bring about change. And we have seen a number of routes where we have brought in new RMPARs, and now it's about taking on the task where we can bring in lower minima because of greater standards through the technology, and we're going through that at the moment with Air Services, and really to develop that, I guess, that bucket list. For conversations in relation to the Minister, I can't speak for that.
Mr Beckett?
Yeah, we've met with the Minister this year, and we
Have you met with the Prime Minister?
No, we have not met.
Or his office?
Or his office. The day we met with the Minister, I think it was the same day that we met with you, Senator. We did talk with the Minister, as we did with you, about Air Services general operations. We also talked to our green paper submission, and our what we're presenting today is comprehensively covered in our green paper submission.
So, can I take it then, Virgin, from your, and Qantas, you'll double check on what your people have said, that the Minister is aware of this solution to the operation within Air Services Australia, to get this strategy implemented?
I understand that the Minister and the Minister's office are fully aware of our submission, and we have
this specific solution.
Yeah, is contained in our submission.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And you'll check on the same for me, please. Thank you, Qantas. Specifically, okay. We've heard a lot about the conflict of interest with Air Services Australia, the Noise Ombudsman, a whole being the regulator marking their own homework, for instance. Do you have a view, does Qantas have a view on whether the Noise Ombudsman should be appointed by Air Services Australia?
Senator, I'll say that I think there would be some benefit in some structural changes, but as to the specifics, I could take the question on notice. I think some more objective framework in terms of noise reporting and so on are some ideas we've put forward.
But do you concede there is an inherent conflict of interest in the relationship between Air Services Australia, the Noise Ombudsman?
I'll take it. Senator, we made it clear in our green paper submission that we think there should be changes. We understand that the Noise Ombudsman is an avenue for the community to sort of raise their concerns. I don't think it is the most effective way for that to occur, and
particularly if you can't get in.
And the volume of complaints is not necessarily a good measure of what needs to be changed. So we made that clear in our green paper submission that we would like to see changes with that, and better data collected as part of those complaints in terms of the reasons for the complaint, what the aircraft was operating, and going back to the prior discussion, whether or not those aircraft are undertaking noise abatement procedures or what kind of technology is on board that aircraft.
Do you concede that the community is rightfully angry about something that seems quite... You're not going to solve all of it. I imagine they don't expect every plane to be entering Brisbane in silence, but that there are strategies available both at the airline level, at the airport level, and the frustration is beyond belief because nobody is taking responsibility. Can I have a commitment from both Qantas and Virgin that you'll do everything in your power as airline leaders in this country to do what has to be done for these communities noise reduction.
Senator, can I say that as an operating and experienced pilot, I can assure you that our pilots are very focused on noise mitigation techniques. I am involved in designing flight crew procedures and techniques, and noise mitigation is one of the metrics that we use. We always strive. We're conscious of the community. We're obviously here. We're represented at a number of community forums. It's very important. Finding that balance is very important too, because frankly, some attempts, well-meaning attempts, have resulted in inefficient track miles here in Brisbane, 37 miles on some procedures extra, more than 700 kilograms of CO2 into the environment. So finding that balance is really important. But I want to assure you that in the piloting community, we're very focused on that.
Virgin.
Absolutely. As I outlined, the three of the really key issues that we included in our submission to government contain the exact things that you've raised. Absolutely, on behalf of the community, we want to do better. It's also frustrating for us to know that the technology and the will exists. To not be able to put that in place in the interest of the community equally frustrates us at Virgin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator McKenzie. Senator Colbeck.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you all. I just want to go back to the conversation that we had with Brisbane Airport with respect to the implementation of the operational plan, the way that the airport was designed to operate, and the fact that we're not operating the airport in the way that it was actually designed to operate, along with the reality that there's effectively been no change in aircraft noise with everything that's happened so far, and get your perspective on the reality of the impact of operating the airport plan in the way that it was designed to operate. So we might start with Qantas and then come to Virgin.
Senator, I'll say that in terms of how we operate the aeroplanes and the modes that air traffic control use, in terms of a mode being which runways are used for departure and arrival, frankly, we follow the guidance that Air Services Australia sets.
I get all that, but the question is, we're not operating the airport the way it was designed to operate. The community were given to believe certain things based on the operational plan of the airport. Now, there are some changes that have been made, tailwind on, for example, being one. The operational plan was drafted based on 10 knots, it's now 5. But that's one element. I mean, can we realistically see some positive change if we're going to operate the airport on the basis of the plan, the way that it was designed to be operated?
Senator, I make the point that the aeroplanes have had capability that effectively lies dormant for 20 years, and we would like to see greater uptake of RMPAR procedures as one of the most effective tools in the toolkit for noise mitigation around noise-sensitive areas for approaches, regardless of which runway end or which mode is used. I mentioned that the airspace procedure design is quite inefficient. The need to find the balance between the noise and the environmental aspects. We have some very aggressive environmental targets that we need to achieve. But as far as those structural aspects, we fly the aeroplane according to the procedures that are published in the Aeronautical Information publication and those air traffic control clearances that we receive.
I get all that, but you would understand how the airport was designed to be operated, would you not?
In my capacity, I have a basic understanding, but I haven't been involved in the airport design.
But you operate an aircraft?
Yes.
That's what you've been doing for 30 years. And you design operational mechanisms to apply what the system does.
Yes.
So I'm asking you to put those two things together, and I just want to understand that if the airport is going to operate the way that it was designed to operate, with your understanding of the actual operation of an aircraft, do you see all of those things together mitigating the impacts of the operation of the airport, which is what, at the bottom end of the day, is this community is looking for?
I think there are a lot of
I just want to ask one more.
tools that we have, as I mentioned, that we're not utilising. That's a great source of frustration for us. I think we can do better collectively for operations in and out of Brisbane, some of the technologies that we've talked about, and we would like to see RMPAR and others more widely implemented. And we can do that very relatively easily from our point of view. The equipment that we've paid for in the aeroplane is there. The pilots are trained. We'd like to use it more. So to that end, we're not seeing the airspace to the level of efficiency and the level of balance between noise and environment to the extent that we'd like to see it right now. If that...
Senator, thank you for the question. From a Virgin Australia perspective, when any airport is designed, it is designed to achieve maximum throughput of movements and passengers while being very conscious of the impacts that it does have to the environment around it. And it is frustrating when we do see day in, day out, when any airport in Australia isn't operating to its maximum that it could be. Now, there's different operating modes that air services sort of dictate. Runways need to be managed in. And usually that's weather dependent, but often it is due to staffing or lack of staffing. And it's disappointing when we're not achieving the mode that it isn't designed. Now, as Brisbane Airport mentioned before, one of the key, limitations at Brisbane is that we're not operating the runways independently of each other because of air services. We would like to see that brought in as a priority, but there are some more crucial priorities that air services does need to focus on before we can do that. And one of that is to get back to pre-COVID staffing arrangements and levels where we as airlines can be assured of our continued service provision 24/7, 365.
Okay, one final question, and Captain Passerini, you did mention in your opening statement a lowering of NOx by 40% from the new aircraft that you're operating. And you've talked about CO2 on a number of occasions, which is obviously an issue that you focus on. We did have some evidence this morning in relation to other environmental considerations, microparticulates in particular. And a question for both of you in respect of the aircraft that you're looking at in purchasing. What understanding of the emissions in relation to those particular matters might be, and how that's impacting on what you're doing, and understanding of what the operational effects of aircraft are having. So this goes to separate health effects. Microparticulates was the issue that was particularly raised this morning.
So is this directly addressing sustainable aviation fuel?
No.
So through Jet A1 emissions at the moment?
No, not carbon emissions.
Okay.
It's a small particulate.
Microparticulates.
PMI 2.5.
And I think Senator McKenzie asked the question in relation to that, and it really doesn't. I mean, you're burning something that's similar. It's just in respect to sustainable aviation fuel. It's just what it's made of. It's still a similar product coming. It's the carbon life cycle of the fuel that you're talking about the difference in, not necessarily what it's emitting.
There's probably just one point of clarity on that, Senator, and that's with regards to sustainable aviation fuel. There, we've seen through some of the studies a reduction in the impurities in the feedstock for sustainable aviation fuels, and we've seen up to a 70% reduction in especially things like sulphur, which would mean that there's a reduction in the soot element, but also in any of the sulphur dioxide generated by Jet A1 molecules that have been formed through sustainable aviation fuel. And just on top of that as well, the 80% carbon life cycle piece is something that we're definitely interested in, and something that we're factoring into some of the performance engineering that we're doing with the fuel performance.
Maybe if you could take on notice, both Qantas and Virgin, about that. It's sort of, I think, 2.5 PMI emissions, and whether that's something will be improved with new fuels, new jets, etc. Thank you very much, and we are asking for those questions on those to come back by the 6th of May. Thanks again very much for your time, and apologise we've gone a little bit over. Now we are going to move